played around with different methods of contacting the other side since I was very young. My grandmother always encouraged those sorts of things, but my mother was always very adamant that anything paranormal or not approved by her church was nothing but crazy and required a one-way ticket to an insane asylum. My grandmother always warned me to never use Ouija boards. It had something to do with how they are made, I guess because they are made in factories most of the time, or even homemade ones because you as the user don't know who made it or how. This can lead to a poltergeist or demonic possession much easier since most don't know how to properly make and use one. So, though I dabbled in other methods whenever I could, I never used a Ouija board. At 19, I was living on my own and had gotten out of a very bad relationship the year before. The guy had been an abusive religious asshole who loved hypocrisy. I started dating again and dabbling with contacting the other side, but I still never used a Ouija board. I finally met a nice guy, and we had a lot of the same interests. I told him how I wanted to use a Ouija board and was thinking of buying one. He urged me to not do that, but said that if my heart was set on it, after a while of us dating, he asked me what was in my closet. I asked him, "What do you mean?" He said that he kept seeing a pair of glowing white eyes in the closet. I tried laughing it off, but ever since I had kicked out my ex, I had been seeing glowing white eyes in my closet. I always assumed I was just scaring myself and that nothing was there, so I suggested that I finally buy a Ouija board and we find out. I went to Target and bought a Ouija board. It took me nearly an hour to find it because the toy section was the last place I would have ever thought to look. There was only one left, and it was behind a crap load of other games. I brought it home and we used it. We started off with basic questions. Does anyone want to talk? Has anyone ever died in this apartment? Shit like that. After a while, I started to think that my boyfriend might be messing with me and moving the piece on his own. So I asked, "What is in my closet?" It spelled eyes, then kept pointing to something off the board. We said goodbye and decided to move our Ouija board session to the closet and see if we could get a better answer. We started playing again, but kept getting the same movement, pointing to something off the board. I finally asked it if it was trying to show us something. Yes. We followed our line of sight to where it was pointing, and in that corner, there were a bunch of plastic bags. I looked through them and found some of my ex's clothing and old belongings. We tossed out the bags that night, and immediately it felt like there was new life in the apartment. It was getting late, and I went to bed while my boyfriend watched TV in the living room. At around 2 in the morning, I woke up and checked on him. He had fallen asleep on the couch. I decided to use the Ouija board and see if I could contact someone alone. But much to my displeasure, I was only getting nonsense and random letters, which I believe means they were just trying to create or find a way into this world, and they were trying to keep the connection. I tossed the board on the floor and said to whatever was communicating, "Yeah, right, I'm going to bed." I went to bed and thought nothing more of it. But my sleep was filled with nightmares that I hadn't had in years. I was drowning. Then I would wash up onto the porch of a large house that just screamed horror. I would then get buried alive, and right as I was about to die, I'd wake up to the sound of the pallet scratching on the Ouija board. All night, I relived the vivid nightmares, only to wake up hearing the pallet scratching furiously on the Ouija board. When I finally got out of bed, I was pissed. I argued with my boyfriend about how him scratching the pallet on the board wasn't funny, and how he was an asshole for keeping me up all night. He swore up and down that it wasn't him. We argued for probably a good hour before he asked me, "Did you say goodbye on the board when you were finished?" I hadn't. We used the board again briefly, asking who was keeping me up and if it was the cause of my nightmares. Then we said goodbye and tossed the board in the dumpster. A few months later, we moved into a new apartment, and while unpacking the boxes, we found the Ouija board at the bottom of a box. I took it as a sign that maybe we were supposed to have it, but he wanted nothing to do with it. I convinced him to use it again with me. We sat in the living room and began, but this time we kept stopping because we would see shit in the apartment, or catch something from the corner of our eyes. I finally agreed that we should stop. But as we were about to say goodbye, my boyfriend started having a seizure. I freaked the fuck out and called an ambulance. While on the phone with 911, I moved the pallet to goodbye and tossed it under the couch. I told the lady on the other end that he had just had a random seizure, and I didn't know what could have triggered it. I sure as hell wasn't going to tell her what had happened. No one would have believed me. So the ambulance came, took him away, and I followed him in my car. By the time I got there, he had stopped seizing and was waiting to have a scan done. I asked him what had happened, but he just shrugged his shoulders and said he didn't know. 1 second he was going to say goodbye, and then he wakes up in the ER. We went home and threw out the Ouija board again. It showed up another 2 weeks later, under the bed. So we did a ritual my grandmother had taught me to help me appease any spirit that tries to come through. We wrapped white cloth with blood on it around the board, sealed the board in a bag, and said a firm goodbye as we threw it away. It's been years, and we haven't seen it since. We're glad, but now my boyfriend has a very stern no Ouija board policy in our home, and has become much more vocal when friends show interest in Ouija boards. I work for one of Australia's biggest telcos and their operational security department. My team is unlike all of the others, and then we work out at a special restricted site since we handle very sensitive data. Every morning I have to drive through a security gate and have my pass vetted by one of the 2 guards. Then park in the nearly empty lot and pass through 2 more security doors and get by another guard before I even make it to the stairs. The buildings on the site were built in the 70s and 80s, and as far as I can tell, they haven't been updated since. The lights are old fluorescent tubes with ancient air conditioning ducts spewing dust onto our heads, and the only lift is a cranky fire hazard that grumbles its way up and down the cables. Luckily, my team is on the first floor, so it's not too stressful to climb 1 flight of stairs. The bathrooms especially are particularly disturbing. As you can probably imagine, despite the company's best efforts to be inclusive in its hiring practices, there are very few women in the building. The men's toilets on the floor are large and have been recently renovated, but the few women have been relegated to an ancient room beside the photocopiers. Accessing that bathroom is strange, in that you have to pass through 2 lockable doors, the inner of which swings outwards and the outer of which swings inwards, and trap you between them for a few seconds. The space is so small, you have to close one in order to open the other, and there are no lights in that tiny space. Each of the doors has a narrow window in it, of the type of glass that makes figures look as though they've been blurred. On the day in particular, I was working late. There had been a minor security incident, and I was on a long phone call working through it with my manager, 2 of my teammates, and a few other people in other departments. It was heading for winter, so it was getting dark early, and the sun had set by the time the incident was solved. I needed to finish up a few emails, so I stayed seated at my desk when my teammates left. Needless to say, I was now alone on the floor. I finished my emails and spent some time cleaning up my inbox. You'd be surprised how quickly unread emails pile up after hours, and it's always bugged me to have too many. Now, the 2 doors leading to the women's toilets had a very specific pair of squeaks. They both had matching laborious sounds, always followed by a heavy clunk of a door hitting the frame too hard. And it surprised me to hear first one door and then the other grudgingly open and close. It was rare to hear those doors even during daylight, but right then, I was pretty sure I was alone on the floor, and even then, surely I was the only woman. I waited, breathless, for any sound. I turned my chair around and watched the outer door clearly visible over the top of the cubicle walls, waiting for a repeat performance. It stayed mute and motionless, but I couldn't bring myself to either turn around and resume working or to get up and go investigate. I'm not an idiot after all. While I was thus occupied watching a door that wouldn't move, I heard the distinct tapping of feet coming down the stairs from one of the upper floors. Assuming it was someone else going home, I ignored it, continuing to focus on the silent door. The footsteps on the stairs paused halfway down, and this time I spun around subtly to glance at whoever was standing there on the stairs, only to discover no one was there. At this point, I was ready to nope the fuck out of there, when there was suddenly a third sound. There's a large plaster dividing wall down the middle of the building with a walkway punched through it, approximately halfway through, and I sit with that walkway to my direct left and my back to the main aisle between the cubicles. As I stared at the stairs, trying to logic my way through these impossibilities, through the plaster walkway, I heard a distant whistling tune. It was so out of place on the silent floor that despite the cheerful sound, my blood chilled and I started shaking. The whistling got closer, heading for the gap in the plaster wall, and my heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth went dry, and tears formed as whatever it was made its way toward me. The bathroom doors banged again behind me, first one, then the other. I stood with a startled yelp and knocked over my chair, turning to look at the loud doors. My legs were shaking, and my fingers were like ice as I stood in the middle of an empty floor and just waited. Even the smell of the place had changed. The scent of 30-year-old dust and layers of people were gone, and instead, it was replaced with a hard, metallic tang of unidentifiable origin. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the lights in my row flickered and took on that purplish demi-glow of sulky fluoros. The bathroom doors audibly smashed again, and I collapsed onto the floor, skidding across the old carpeting to shelter under my desk in the darkness. Clutching my knees, I closed my eyes, tears falling freely. As that distant whistling picked up again, and an equally distant phone started to ring. Something thundered up and down the stairs, invisible feet beating every step, and the whistling started getting closer and closer. It remained cheery and unperturbed, despite the elephantine levels of noise from the stairs and the awkward banging of the bathroom doors. I huddled under my desk as the sinister, cheerful noise passed by. Whatever it was stopped next to my desk, and I held my breath. All of a sudden, the lights came back on, the darkness disappeared from the floor, the bathroom doors remained blissfully quiet, and the stairs were apparently unoccupied. It took me almost 10 minutes to brave crawling out from under the desk, and, still shaky, I righted my chair and sat down to shut my computer off. As my body slowly calmed down, I tried to rationalize what had happened. Wind creating the whistling noise, weird air pressure currents that made the doors bang, ancient wiring causing the lights to turn off. I packed up my laptop and headed downstairs cautiously, just in case. I said goodnight to the guard at the front desk, and he looked up from the poor-quality CTV screens with a friendly smile. "You guys are always up there working so late. At least you're not the last one to leave tonight." Frowning, I wandered over and looked at the CTV screens and gasped. Standing there, unmoving in the middle of the first-floor landing, was a blurry figure. The screen flicked automatically over to another view, and after 10 seconds or so flipped back to the first camera, and the figure was gone. As I watched, the lights on that floor went out again. The guard frowned with obvious confusion. "That's odd. It shouldn't be turning off if someone's up there." He glanced at me. After all, the lights up there are motion-controlled. I have no idea what we were thinking. I've never heard anything good come of using a Ouija board. That didn't stop me and a few friends from trying to talk to someone or something on the other side. And I can tell you right now, we did not have the best prospects in mind. It was a Friday evening. We had just gotten out of school, Terry, Garrett, Corbin, and I. Usually, we'd either laze around playing video games or just read comics and manga. That day was different, because that day was the day after we had discovered that my mother had a Ouija board tucked away in her closet. Lucky us, we all thought. As soon as we got to my house, I ran to my parents' room and grabbed the box holding the board. My parents didn't come home from work until around 5:30 in the evening. We gathered in a circle in my bedroom floor, going over ideas for what to say. The usual preteen obscenities were tossed around before we got serious and settled on trying to contact a demon. Okay, yeah, we were skipping straight to black. trying to contact a being that would love to rip out our throats. But you have to understand, none of us actually believed in demons or ghosts. We were just trying to have a laugh. We definitely weren't laughing in the end. I laid the planchette on the board, and we all placed our hands on it. Garrett, being the most outgoing one, decided to do the speaking. "Is there a spirit amongst us?" He deepened his voice, trying to sound all creepy. I could hear the other two snicker. Of course, there was no answer. I was actually amazed that none of us were trying to move the planchette on our own. I didn't feel any pressure from the others. They all seemed too distracted by Garrett's theatrics to care. "Are there any demons here with us?" he asked even louder, as if taunting a faceless presence. "Nothing," he continued. "Do something freaky if there is a demon." Before Garrett could finish, Corbin's head came crashing down to the board, and the planchette flew across the room, hitting and cracking the window. My heart sank. All our smiles fell from our faces. Suddenly, the hanging light on the ceiling fell to the floor and busted into 100 little shards. That's when we all jumped back. We had no shoes on at the time, but I'm sure that was the last thing on our minds. A few seconds passed by unperturbed before we collected ourselves and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind us. The moment we shut that door, we heard a terrible racket coming from the room, like a herd of bulls were rampaging inside. The door itself was eerily still, but it literally sounded like a warhead went off inside. Just as fast as I had left, I ran and opened the door. I couldn't breathe at the sight of everything. My bed was stood up against the wall vertically, the sheets shoved in the windowsill blocking out the sunlight. Everything that had been in the floor, including the Ouija board and the planchette, a few PS3 controllers and some books, had vanished. None of us talked about that day with anyone else. Not only was it terrifying, we were kind of embarrassed for being stupid enough to call out for trouble from a being that would prefer all of humanity to be dead. Oddly enough, when I put my room back in order, I found the controllers and the books, even the planchette. But the Ouija board was gone, as if it had never existed. I honestly have no idea what the hell happened to it. Even weirder was the fact that my mom never asked about it. I don't know if she simply never used it, so she never noticed it was gone. But she hasn't confronted me about the missing Ouija board yet. I'm just lucky that thing didn't start haunting our home. I'm happy that what happened was all that happened. It was the most horrible experience of my life. Before I delve into telling you my tales, I must warn you that I don't really care if you believe me or not. These experiences really happened to me, and these experiences have shaped the person I am today. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. These experiences have taken place from when I was 7 to most recently, November of 2015, up until my first Ouija board. We shall start at the beginning, the first apparition. As stated before, this happened when I was 8. I had just fallen asleep, one of those close your eyes, open them, and it's suddenly 7 in the morning kind of nights. However, I awakened around 4 in the morning. The right side of my bed was pushed against the wall, so I turned my head and saw nothing but the wall. I turned the other way, and I saw a figure that will haunt me until I die. Its eyes were black, a black hole for a mouth, and eyes a charcoal color. Its skin was a greenish gray. I remember pulling the covers over my head and trying not to scream. I peeked out from the covers and saw it was unfolding and folding its arms, as well as opening and closing its mouth, almost like it was trying to say something, but no sound came out. I then remember blacking out, opening my eyes to find that I had lost 4 hours, making it 8 in the morning. This is what sparked my experiences. My second experience happened when I was 10. I was watching TV one Sunday before church. Then came a feeling of intense dread, fear, like eyes watching me. It got so bad that I hid behind the couch I was sitting on. I stayed like this until my mother dragged me out to go to church. Throughout the day, those feelings permeated my entire body. This lasted throughout the entire summer. Each day the feeling got stronger and stronger. Every minute I spent in my house, the greater the feeling of dread and of being watched became. The first night I was feeling this way, I remember closing my eyes and seeing a white shape of a skull. The details were fuzzy, as this happened many years ago. The feeling, though, of something going into me, and I remember feeling completely isolated and alone. I started crying and screaming for my parents. They came rushing in to find me in the fetal position, whimpering. Nothing happened again until around January, when the same feeling came back. At this time, my family had moved. Not out of the state, you understand, but just a few miles down from where I had originally lived. It didn't come on as fast as when I was younger. This time it was more subtle. Felt minor bursts of dread instead of weeks of feeling it, as well as easily shaking feelings of being watched. Now, this is where it gets crazier. I started to hear a voice. It had the overtone of a child, but it had a deep, gravelly undertone. It would say things like, "You are mine, by my power." After these, I decided to seek a priest. I told him everything and was convinced that a demon was terrorizing me. He told me how to, in his words, rebuke spirits. This worked for a while, and the activity died down for a few months. It started to pick up again when I got interested in Ouija boards. It was a week before Halloween that I got one, and I used it immediately. Each time I used it, I got a feeling of what I can only say feels like something wanting to enter my body. It wasn't on one specific place. This feeling was throughout my entire body. Each time I used it, the feeling got stronger and stronger. It is now 3 months since this time, and since I used the Ouija board. There has been no activity since then, and at this point, I'm just waiting for something else to happen. This is a true story that happened to me a few years ago. I still get freaked out anytime I think about it, so let me share it with you. A few years ago, I was a supervisor for a security company. I worked in the patrol division. We would basically patrol various clients' properties through the night. We had businesses as well as residential. We also responded to calls from residents on the properties. Most were harmless, drunk, loud people usually. Parties that get out of hand. One night I got a call about a suspicious person walking around some townhomes. This area is pretty quiet, surrounded by woods, and it was more middle class than the others. After getting the notice, I arrive on the property about 10 minutes later and drive to the area. I shut off my vehicle and take a look around. As I am walking near the woods, I hear something walking not far from me. Now there are deer and other animals in those woods, but this one seemed to not only keep pace with me, but stop when I stop. I shine my flashlight into the woods, but I couldn't see anything. Not finding anything unusual, I go back to my vehicle and write my report, just saying that it was probably kids messing around. I leave and go about my night. About 2 hours later, I get another call. This time the caller said someone was looking into their window, but could not give a description. I go back this time, running with no lights on. I get out of my vehicle in a different area facing the woods, with the dome light disabled. I open the door, leaving it cracked, and proceed around the houses. Again, I do not find anything except a handprint on the window in question. I walk close to the woods on the way back to my vehicle. I was standing about 20 feet in front of it, but right by the woods. Suddenly, I hear a rough voice say, Hey, come here." Thinking it was a prank, I say, "All right, you've had your fun, but you're scaring the residents. Come out and talk to me." Again, I hear from the woods, "No, you come here and we will have some fun." Insert creepy chuckle. At this time, I am freaking out. It is dark. I'm alone. Even if the police or a phone call away, I try to play it cool. I reply, "Whatever, just stay off the property." I turn to go when I hear someone in the woods moving. Then, in a loud voice, I hear, "Don't turn your back on me." I said, "Get in here, or you will pay." And that was it. I was 100% terrified. I turned fast, drawing my 9mm as I did, pointing it and my flashlight into the woods, saying, "So much as show your face, I'm going to shoot. I'm calling the police." I didn't get a response. I went back to my vehicle, turning on all the lights. Headlight, spotlight, and light bar, all of them shining onto the woods. I called the cops. We are well known and generally liked by the police, so it only takes a few minutes for them to respond. They had me wait a while they checked the woods. A few minutes later, one calls over for me to come to him. There, 40 feet into the woods, is a nightmare. There is a homemade hunting blind set up, a shovel, a tarp, and a shallow pit. The police never found the person, and no one had seen him since that night. I still don't know what to make of it. Was it a harmless prank, or a killer waiting for me in those woods? The 2 calls that night were made from a prepaid cell phone. All the residents said that they never made any calls, so I assume it was him. I quit my job shortly after that. I don't think I could handle another situation that weird. This is probably not what you were expecting, but here we go. I used to work for a relatively small security company. It was privately owned, and about 30 employees were there altogether. They'd get a contract with a factory, and then basically your job was to sit in that factory for 8 to 12 hours when no one was working. So I'd be working by myself, alone, overnight, in a completely empty factory. In my 2 years of doing that job, I never one time saw a single thing I would call supernatural. However, I did see Dennis. One night, my captain calls me on my phone and tells me a new trainee will be coming in the morning at about 5. I had to show him the ropes, teach him how to make the rounds. You walk around the building, that's basically what making a round is. So it's about 4:45 in the morning, and I step outside of the parking lot to have a smoke and wait on the new guy. After about 10 minutes, a car pulls up, stops, backs up, and drives away. I was clearly visible, so I have no idea why he left, but the car passed by 3 to 4 more times before finally pulling in and shutting off the engine. I can see him in the car, and he's just sitting in the driver's seat, staring at me. In the back seat are 2 kids probably around 6 to 8 years old. After about 3 minutes of me wondering what the hell is going on, he gets out of the car. Dennis is fucked up looking. He's about 4'10" and fatter than damn near anyone I have ever seen. He has a huge rash covering about 70% of his body, with a white crust outlining most of it. And then he speaks. I had a little trouble finding the place. His voice is high-pitched, I mean really high-pitched. I'm talking Judge Doom in the final scene of Who Framed Roger Rabbit high-pitched. Then he extends one hand to shake mine. Without thinking much, I shake it. There's one finger on it. Just one. And the rest of the hand looks like some kind of stumpy flesh mitten. One of the kids gets out of the car, has the same rash, is also very fat, is also missing fingers. He says, "Daddy, can I get a drink?" Dennis turns around and screams in that high-pitched voice, "Get back in the damn car and don't get out again." I'm in fucking shock, so I take the guy around the factory, show him the perimeter, tell him where the emergency stuff is. About a minute into our walk, I notice this guy smells like hell. I mean, he literally reeks of sweat and fresh diarrhea. The whole time he's asking me strange questions like, "Do you have a crush on anyone that works here?" Or, "Can I hunt on this property?" He finally leaves after standing in the office trying to make small talk with me for about 15 minutes after the tour. On his way out, he said, "We're going to be good friends, even if you don't think so." I went home about 2 hours later and stood in the shower for a good solid hour, washing myself, trying to get the image of that guy out of my head. I called my captain and asked him to reassign me someplace else. Never had to see him again. That's been more than 10 years, and the thought of Dennis still bothers me.
So, it's 11:30 p.m., and I'm making my nightly rounds, making sure all doors are locked before I start my nightly cleaning routine. I'm a janitor at one of the many Gold's gyms. This Gold's gym is hidden from the road enough to where the doors aren't too visible from the highway. I won't lie, it creeps me out sometimes working here alone until 3 a.m., so I always make sure to bring headphones to listen to my music. I also make sure to leave all the lights on and have weapons hidden in each room as I clean. I'm minding my own business, mopping the main floor by the front desk and getting ready to turn on my music. That's when I hear loud banging on the glass. I look up and see nothing. I feel chills. The window shows nothing but pitch black night sky. I shake my head and go to press play. But then more banging. This time it's even louder. I run to the front of the gym to see a man. He's pressed against the window staring at me. He's dressed in a hoodie and sweatpants and looks to be in his 30s. His eyes looked bloodshot, as if he was exhausted. "Sorry, we are closed," I say nervously. I try to show that I'm not scared, but my heart is pounding a little too fast. "I left my gym shoes," he says flatly. "You will have to come back tomorrow," I say. He stands there and doesn't say anything. Moments go by and I feel like an idiot just standing there. A creepy smirk appears across his face. "Have a good night," he says a little too happily. He walks off into the darkness. I shake my head and tell myself to calm down. I decide it's best not to play music at this time. I need to make sure this man really left. I, being a man myself, know that I'm a pretty strong guy, but this guy looked built. It honestly freaks me out. But I started cleaning again. As I keep telling myself, there is nothing to be scared of. I hear a loud bang come from the back of the gym. I feel my breath catch inside my throat. I hear it again, louder this time. I inhale deeply as I reach for my knife. I slowly make my way to the back door. I hear a constant banging as I grow closer. Luckily, the back door is solid metal and sturdy. I know it's locked, but I can see the vibrations with each bang. What makes it even creepier is, I swear I hear snarling and growling. I put my hand on the door and hold my knife up with the other. Just then, the banging stops. "Go away, or I will call the police," I manage to choke out. I can hear a man's laugh. "They can't save you," he groans. I run away from the door as quickly as I can to the manager's office. I lock myself into the room and grab my cell phone to dial 911. Just as it starts ringing, the power to the gym goes off. I let out a huge gasp. 911, what's the emergency?" a woman says from the other line. "Please help me. Someone is trying to break into the gym." I hear glass shatter. "I think he just broke in." "Okay, sir. I need you to stay calm. Where are you located?" she asks. As I start to reply, I hear footsteps outside the door. I get down behind the desk next to me. 412 Southern Plaza, off Brook Road, I whisper. "Okay, sir. Just stay in the line. Cops are on their way," she says assuringly. I start to reply when laughter comes from the other side of the door. "I can smell you. You smell so scared," a rusky voice bellows. I gulp. Sweat is pouring down my forehead. "Sir, are you there?" the 911 operator asks. "Yes," I whisper. "The cops won't make it by the time I get through this door," the voice yells. "Please, you can take anything you want, just leave me alone," I yell, trying to sound non-frightened. I grip my knife close to me, and I look around for weapons in case I have to fight. "You know, you're right. I think I will let this be a warning. When you least expect it, I will find you, and I will come for you. It could be at your house, in the quiet neighborhood, the place where you go to play cards every Friday, or here." where you're all alone every night 6 days a week. I can't catch my breath as I realize this man must be stalking me. Who are you? I yell. The man laughs devilishly. You will see me in time. I hear footsteps getting fainter. Then I hear cop sirens in the background, so I hung up the cell phone. I don't come out from under the desk until a cop busts down the door. When they lead me out, I see the front windows are shattered. I tell them everything, and they take it all down. They suggest I go nowhere alone and always have a weapon on me. I proceeded to take it a step further. I now have moved, switched jobs, and my weekly routine. I will take no chances. Assisted Living by CNA. I've worked on plenty of night shifts, and very few have been creepy experiences. But this, unfortunately, was one of the creepiest. I take care of the elderly. I provide any medical or domestic care that they need in order for them to remain at home. But sometimes I have clients that live in assisted living facilities. In the morning, I took care of a couple who lived in one. The wife had become a walking vegetable after 2 bad strokes, and the husband was too obese to do anything without assistance. One day, I get asked by my boss to stay overnight because the husband had been hospitalized. I asked what my duties would be, and I'm told that it's a warm body case. I get paid just to be another warm body in the apartment, so there really were no duties. I show up for the shift, and everything's going pretty smoothly. My client is asleep, the facility is locked up, and there's the occasional nurse or caretaker walking down the halls. Around 11 p.m., I hear a knock on the door. I look through the peephole and see one of the nurses that I'm friendly with. I open the door and we chat quietly in the hall for a bit before he leaves. He tells me not to leave my client's room unless necessary, because after midnight, things get weird. I just laugh it off and we go back to work. The night continues to be uneventful, and around 1 a.m., I need some coffee. I grab the keys, lock the door behind me, and take the elevator from the 3rd to the 1st floor. The ride is a little odd. Lights flickered once, and the elevator seemed to be going extra slow. I brush it off as my nerves getting the best of me. I go into the kitchen area and see something move out of the corner of my eye. I feel my blood go cold, but walk quicker to the coffee pot. I tell myself to calm down and stop being a coward. It's all those horror movies and the creepy setting just getting to me. I feel like something is behind me. A cold shiver runs down my body, and I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Against my better judgment, I turn around and see just the last glimpse of someone walking into the dining hall. I follow the person, and once I'm in the unlit dining hall, I call out to them. "Hello?" The person turns around, and all I hear is their walker hitting the floor. It's an old woman. She says back to me, "Oh, I didn't know anyone was still up." I take a step back towards the lighted kitchen area. "It's pretty late," I say. "You should really be going to bed. What if you fell?" She walked closer to me, and once in the kitchen area says, "Oh, you're right, darling, but I just enjoy the quiet of the night." She gives me a wide, toothless grin. Something about her face just unsettled me. I had seen plenty of toothless smiles before, but her face when smiling seemed so menacing. I grab my coffee and listen to the tap of her walker go towards the elevator. I heard her begin to talk to someone, but couldn't tell if she was still in the hall on going into the elevator. On their way, she wasn't my problem, especially now with that unnerving, smiling face. I took the stairs to the 2nd floor, and walked to the other side of the building to take the other elevator. I enjoy taking this route back during the day because the second floor has an open type of hallway where you can see the downstairs lobby and the piano next to the reading area with a large window from ceiling to floor. It's a very picturesque view. I looked at the lobby as I passed by and saw multiple white and gray blurry figures outside. I stopped dead in my tracks and felt my blood go cold and rushed to my feet. I told myself that it must just be foggy outside, when maybe there was some new shrubbery and in the dark my eyes were playing tricks on me. I somehow found a way to start quick walking down the hall again, but was stopped after only a few steps by the sound of keys being hit on the piano. Alarms started going off in my head, and now was the time to freak out. Now was the time to run like hell back to my client and never work here again at night. But all I could do was look back down into the lobby and stare at the piano. There was a tall, very pale, elderly person sitting there. I felt a bit of relief and began to calm down as he played a few more keys. I let out a sigh of relief as he looked up at me. His face was clearly covered in wrinkles and very gaunt, but his eyes were completely hollow and black. I felt my breath leave me and I was frozen. I couldn't comprehend anything. My mind kept saying that it must be an illusion caused by lighting or something, but everything else in me kept screaming that this wasn't an illusion. The man got up silently. Not even the bench made its usual creaking sound. He ran out of sight towards another room on the first floor. He ran, not hobbled, not walked, but ran. He didn't shuffle his feet. He didn't move at the speed of any other elderly person I'd ever seen. I lost my nerve and sprinted to the emergency stairway and ran to my client's apartment. By the time I had calmed down, I realized that I had lost my coffee along the way and my right ankle was sprained. All I cared about was that I was safe and that I wouldn't end up being in a horror movie scenario. The rest of my shift I was wide awake. I would occasionally hear footsteps in the hall or knocks on the door. Twice, I had gotten up to investigate through the peephole, but didn't find anything, and figured I shouldn't push my luck. I still do the same type of work, but I haven't gone back to that building since. I told the guy I was friendly with about it, and he said it was very common, and was the reason why none of the caretakers went outside after a certain time. I used to work second shift at a hospital, 3 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. One thing I've learned about hospital folks is, if you ask them if the hospital is haunted, there's an extremely high chance they'll say yes and tell you stories. One night it was extremely slow on our floor. We sat around and the nurses told scary stories. My shift ended, so I went to leave. I was the only person who left at that time, so I got in the elevator by myself. An important note here is, we were working on the 9th and topmost floor. I had, on many occasions, gone up the single flight of stairs and out the door to the roof to watch the life flight helicopter take off from the ground. So, I'm getting on the elevator to leave and I push the button to the parking garage. The doors close and I'm relaxing and leaning against the back wall, thinking about all those ghost stories I just heard. I look up at the display to watch the floor numbers progress when I see the up arrow glowing. That's impossible. I am on the top floor. I watch fully, expecting the arrow to switch directions, when the car starts moving up. My eyes are wide open right now. This should be physically impossible. There is no 10th floor in this hospital. I'm fairly sure this elevator is taking me to hell right now. The car slowly stops and the doors open. It's a blank, unmarked hallway. It's really dark, only being lit from the elevator lights and the single emergency light at the end of the hall. I stick my head out just enough to peek out the door. All I can see is this dark hallway with some really old hospital beds without mattresses. After a few seconds of perfect silence, The elevator dings and the doors close. The arrow points downwards and takes me to the parking garage. I told my story to a couple nurses the next night. Apparently, it was a floor only used for storage, and you're not supposed to be able to get to it without this special key. No one had an explanation for why it took me there, other than someone pushing the call button on that floor. In our home on Harris Street, we've encountered everything, from disembodied voices, dark figures, levitating items, shaking beds, to full-up physical manifestations of family members who weren't in the home at the time, or they were on the opposite side of the house. Here are some things that happened to my mother. But first, let me give you a little more information on my youngest sister's imaginary friends. My little sister at the time had 3 imaginary friends. Katie, who was a little blonde girl. I don't recall the name of the lady. All I remember is my sister saying she had a blue dress and her hair was in a bun. The third wasn't really a friend, I suppose. She called him the Woodchucker Man. He was a very tall, heavy-set man, with blue overalls and a red long-sleeve plaid shirt underneath. She said he was bald on top and had longer hair on the back of his head, and that he was a very bad man who didn't like Katie. At the time, the crazy paranormal stuff wasn't happening, other than disembodied voices and the occasional dark figure, so all of us brushed off her friends. Until one day I was watching TV in our living room. My sister was playing and talking with Katie, when she suddenly looked over to me and said, "Katie wants to tickle you." I said, "Okay, whatever, let her tickle me," and I kept watching the show on TV. Out of nowhere, I get this really strong tingling sensation in my armpits. It scared the shit out of me, but I didn't react at all. I wanted to ask my sister if she knew where Katie was tickling me. Before I could even ask, she looked at me, smiled and said, "She's tickling you on your armpits." My heart sank, and I began to think, if Katie's real, what about the other 2? On another note, my dad would work 4 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, so my mom would wake up to make him lunch and send him off, then afterwards fall back asleep. So she's laying in bed and she flung her arm to the other side, and she hit someone. Thinking it was my dad, she brought her arm back to her side of the bed, when suddenly she remembered having packed his lunch that morning, and she noticed that the body was too big to have been any of us kids, or even my dad. So she rolled off the bed and crawled out of the room. That's when she started sleeping in the living room. I couldn't help but think that was the Woodchucker Man. Fast forward a week. My mother is asleep on the couch, while the kitchen and living room have no wall separating each other. So she would leave the light on above the stove to keep the living room semi-lit. It's about 3 a.m. when she wakes up to the sound of drawers in the kitchen opening and closing. Thinking it's one of us, she ignores it at first. But the rummaging continues. Still half asleep, she asks, "Who's there?" There was no answer. Then the fridge opened. My mom opened her eyes and looked into the kitchen through the reflection of the television to see a little girl standing by the fridge holding it open. Still thinking it's my sister, she asks, "My daughter, what are you looking for?" She said the little girl looked at her through the reflection of the TV and disappeared. Then the fridge door just closed. My mother was so paralyzed with fear, she couldn't even move. Let's just say, she didn't get much sleep that night. Attacked by a Shadow by Milius MD. In August 2015, I was visiting my parents. My parents and I were talking. I love reading about mythology. I study mythology when I'm not actually studying, and when I get a bit enthusiastic, I can get completely carried away in discussions on this subject. On one of my mythologic rampages, I was discussing the Titan Nyx. This is a Titan of darkness. On that subject, my mother pitches in a little nugget of information. That talk about the dark reminds me, do you know what your 8-year-old cousin has done? Now, that particular cousin is on my father's side of the family, and we don't really keep in touch that much. So I answered, no, of course not. Well, they just moved into a new place and her daughter was having trouble sleeping. She kept seeing something of a shadow coming out of the wall. At this point, I started getting goosebumps, not really knowing why. I'm agnostic. I love reading about mythology. I love visiting places that have mythological significance. However, I couldn't remember experiencing something paranormal or really creepy that can't be explained. My mother continued, "Did you know they got a psychic over there? They removed the drapes where the shadow kept reoccurring, and now it's quiet." My feeling of discomfort kept increasing, even though I have less faith in psychics than I have in winning the lottery. I wish I had done that. It took me years when this happened to you. Now at this point my hair was standing on end. I remembered that exact thing that she was talking about. However, I hadn't thought about it for years. I couldn't remember it. But now that I can, I don't know why not. I remembered the real pressing feeling of something watching. It gave me chills. I asked what we did about it. "Well, we changed the drapes and moved you to another room, then it stopped." However, I moved back to the same room when I was 12. Indeed, I never had a problem again, so I thought I'd forget about it. The dreams I've been having afterward have been messed up, so a friend and I planned to just go out. We went to the pub and started talking after a few beers. He started, "So what's up? You look like crap." I told him about the nightmares that started a week ago, and the story that started this. His eyes went wide. He started, "Are you for real or are you just messing with me? I never told that story except to my girlfriend." "What story?" He told the exact same thing. A shadow oozing out of the wall at night, keeping him awake as a child. We started talking and he told me about shadow people. I started searching, and this is how I actually stumbled at the first stories of Darkness Prevails. Since the story, my dreams have been messed up, either drowning under a tidal wave or running from something. My personal favorites are waking up to someone standing over me with an expression of utter hate, and dreaming about a white place, like the scene "We Need Lots of Guns" in The Matrix, where a shadow with fangs attacks me, stabs me in the right shoulder, and me waking up bolting upright, and a shoulder that hurts even 3 months after that dream. I visited the hospital with this shoulder and nothing was wrong except a decrease in mobility. I don't know what is happening, but I am starting to train myself for lucid dreaming. At least it helps me wake up when I want to. The dreams are finally decreasing with me learning more control. However, from time to time there are still dreams happening where a shadow tries to attack me.
This incident happened to my little brother when he was only about 6 or 7. He is 20 now and still tries to find a logical reason for this occurrence and lives in denial of it. My parents, however, recall this incident pretty vividly. In our home at the time, my parents' room was the first one in the hallway, then the bathroom and our bedrooms were at the very end. My 2 brothers shared a room, and my sisters and I shared the other. Our parents always left the hallway light on for us, in case we needed to go to the bathroom, so we wouldn't be afraid, due to previous paranormal incidents. One morning, My youngest brother asked my father, "Dad, in the middle of the night, did you go and check on us?" My father asked why he was asking that. My brother told him, "Because the last few nights, I hear you when you open Vanessa's door, and then you open mine and look at me. Then you close the door and walk back to your room. I know it's you because you drag your feet on the carpet." My dad said, "Yeah, I check on you guys to make sure you're okay." My brother just said, "All right." Little did my brother know that it wasn't my father checking in on us, and he only said that so that we wouldn't worry. That night, my dad tucked us all in, as he usually did when he was home, and we all went to sleep. Later that night, my little brother heard my dad walk down the hallway, open the door to my room, then shut it. Then he opened the door to his room. Whoever it was stared at him for what seemed like forever. Finally, he closed the door and began walking back down the hallway, dragging his feet and presumably headed to my parents' room. My brother got out of bed to go talk to what he thought was my dad. He opened his bedroom door and saw this figure walk into my parents' room. He followed curiously to see my dad. When he walked into the room, he saw both my parents asleep in the bed. Then something caught his eye, a figure crouching in front of my parents' bathroom door, covering the long mirror attached to it. It was tall, but sort of crouched, with its legs slightly bent, its arms lifted, and its hands were positioned in the way someone's would be if they were pretending to be a monster. And it had a long, wavy tongue, like a serpent's. My brother instantly began screaming and crying as he jumped into my parents' bed. My parents woke up and tried to comfort him, but my brother told them what had happened, and my father made a sweep through the house. He found nothing. The nightly visits stopped, and my brother never saw that thing again. My name is Bia. I'm a 17-year-old student, and I'm just here to give you one piece of advice. Do not use the Ouija board, ever. Everything started when I decided I was going to make a Ouija board as decoration for my room. I went to a stationery and printed the image of the Ouija board and pasted it in a piece of wood. It was spotless, as if I'd purchased it from a store. I was pretty happy with my result. I actually did it without the intention to use it, because, let's face it, I would never believe that a ghost could talk to me. But there was one night when my parents had gone to deal with some family matters in our hometown, Tabira. I invited my friends to come have dinner and spend the night with me to see a movie and share some laughs. I had the idea to get the Ouija board and use it to scare my friends, and of course, I put my alarm with the sound of a door closing. So they came, we gathered in the living room, and we set the Ouija board on the floor. Everyone was playing. I asked really serious questions. Is there someone here we can talk to? No answer. So I said again in a stronger tone, if you are here, give us a sign. Still, no answer. We laughed, and nothing really happened for the rest of the night. My friends went home, I thanked them for the company, went to my room, and closed the door. I'm pretty paranoid. I do not like to see the door of my living room. I always think I'm going to see someone. I closed the blinds, and I laid down on my bed, falling asleep easily. What must have been moments later, I wake up. I felt something on my bed next to my feet. I immediately assumed it was my cat, which made me comfortable and happy. I love having my cat next to me. But then I was almost falling asleep once more. I heard an anguished breath to my left. I panicked, not knowing what to do. A lot of thoughts went through my head, but I couldn't do anything. I tried to stick up my hand to feel what was breathing, but I instantly thought to myself, are you fucking crazy? What am I going to do if I find something's head and hair in my hands? Don't do it. The breathing continued, and it sounded like it was coming from a woman. I'd had enough, and I got the guts to turn the lights on. But I was so scared, I could not find the lamp button. I honestly thought I was going to die, without my parents there to help me, and with no idea of what to do next. Then, finally, I managed to find the button. I turned the light on. It took so long. When the lights came on, there was nothing in the room but my cat standing with sleepy eyes 1 meter away from me, next to the wall. So the thing is, cats don't breathe through their mouths. So who could have made that sound that terrified me that night?